holding this. Mahatma Prabhu has been doing a marathon of Krishna Katha all week, and unfortunately I missed it all, but apparently it's been pretty fantastic. I know it's all there on Facebook. And so we'd like to welcome Mahatma Prabhu for his last presentation, I guess, here in sunny Ireland. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Govinda. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare. Thank you. Jai Prabhupada. I don't mess around. Serious.
I take.
Totally.
Are we live?
We are. And you were. We recorded you. Is there a hole there?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's up there.
Jai Hare Krishna. So, how many of you have been to Vrindavan? Raise your hand. Okay. If you haven't been to Vrindavan, we're going to go there now by singing this song. And I want to tell you a story about Vrindavan. I have a friend, he does tours in Vrindavan. He takes people on tours. But there's an interesting group that comes every year. They're a group of photographers, and they're not really interested in India or spirituality. But their professor is a devotee. So they do, photograph. They go to different places to do photography. So he takes them to Vrindavan. Why not take them to Vrindavan? The school will pay for it. And there's so many wonderful things to photograph, but it's also, Vrindavan's very special. So my friend who does a tour told me that every time, like the last day when they're leaving, they have a question. And the question is, how come we feel so different in Vrindavan? What is this feeling? I've never felt this before. So Vrindavan is the place where Krishna appeared and grew up. And this is a song about Vrindavan. And maybe it'll transport you there to some degree. Anyway, those of us who've been to Vrindavan, we can easily go there by singing this song. But this is a song about Krishna and his friends and lovers and his pastimes in Vrindavan. So, if you've never been to Vrindavan, maybe you'll feel something. Maybe we can be transported. We need have any harmonium repairmen in the audience? We'll try our best. Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Jana Balabha Giribhara Dhari Jana Balabha Gopi Jana Balabha Giribhara Dhari Yasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yasodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tera Manachari Tera Yamuna Tera Manachari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Ye Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yashodanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yamuna Tera Vanachari Tera Yamuna Tera Vanachari Tera Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Janavallabha Girivaradhari Gopi Janavallabha Girivaradhari Janavallabha Yasodhanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yasodhanandana Vraja Janaranjana Yasodhanandana Vraja Janaranjana Vraja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Shri Radha Madhava ki Srila Prabhupada ki Jai Go Premanande Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Sunyavari Paschatira Satarine Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangulangayate Girim Yakripatamaham Vande Sri Guru Dinatarinam. By the mercy of the spiritual master, a dumb man can speak poetry, a blind man can see stars in the sky, and a lame man can climb mountains. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhyevacha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shadvaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Ram. So thank you for coming. Nice to see you. Nice to be here. This is my last day. I came last Monday. We got a few minutes of sunshine here or there, so the trip was worth it. And I have no planned topic, and I like that people ask questions or direct me towards a particular topic which would be relevant and or of interest to you, because I could speak about something that maybe is not so relevant to your life right now, today, or relevant to what's on your mind or in your heart. So for the last few years I've just been sitting here silently on Sunday programs till somebody raises their hand. So now I have to warn you, if you don't ask a question, I will ask you a question. My questions are harder to answer than your questions. So, anything relating to spiritual life that you're interested in? Yes, sir.
How do we remove envy from?
Oh, yeah. Easy. I'll tell you what Prabhupada said, and I'll tell you my realization. But first I'll tell you what Prabhupada said, because it's so interesting. We were actually talking about this a few days ago. And Prabhupada said, the interesting thing about envy is you're not envious of anyone you don't respect, because they have what you want. So it's actually a sign of respect. You don't realize it, but it is. And therefore Prabhupada said, you should actually serve them because you respect them. And Patanjali, he made an interesting point. He said, whenever you have a thought or emotion which is diametrically opposed to the thought or emotion that you want, then just go 180 degrees. So whatever you're feeling, that is the wrong feeling or the wrong thought, shift it 180 degrees. So he said, if you're feeling envy towards someone, become their well-wisher, because that's the complete opposite. So you're counteracting it, and of course you're faking it to some degree, but you're engaging. You try to engage. If I'm envious of someone, I try to engage in acts as if I'm their well-wisher, because that begins to counteract the envy. There's and Prabhupada's saying, if you're envious, you actually respect them and you should serve them. It's similar to that, isn't it? Like, serve the person you're envious of. Now, I once heard a very interesting thing, not by someone who's that spiritual, although he claims to be a Buddhist, but his main teaching is how to make money. And he said something very interesting. He said, if you don't have money and you're walking down the street and some guy drives up in a Rolls Royce and gets out of the car, you want to strangle him, don't you? You're trying to get the money to pay your rent, and he drives up in a Rolls Royce. I hate you. And he said, that kind of envy is really foolish, because if you want to be wealthy, you want to be like him, don't hate him, because you're hating the thing that you actually want. So he was saying, I think it was in some way similar to what Prabhupada's saying, envy, it's like counterproductive, because you end up turning against the thing that you want. So you're creating a negative around the thing you want. So I want a lot of money, but I don't like rich people. Well, if you don't like rich people, your consciousness is not properly situated for being wealthy. You should like rich people, and you should admire them and want to be like them. So this man said, when the guy drives up in the Rolls Royce, gets out of the car, go up and shake his hand and say, "Thank you, you're such a good example for me because I want to be like you." So I really like the point, because he was making the point that envy is self-defeating, because you end up turning against the thing that you want. It's so interesting, isn't it? Now, my personal realization about envy, in addition to these things, is that if I'm not satisfied with who I am, then I'm a prime candidate for becoming envious of someone else. Like if I think, I never did anything really that great, and here we have Korma, world famous chef, he has books, television shows. Now, I become envious of him for no other reason than my own disqualification. There's nothing about Korma. Actually, he did so many wonderful things. Now I'm envious because I didn't do anything wonderful. And I feel like I'm pretty much a failure in life because I wasn't on a TV show, I didn't write a book. So now I become envious of him because he's more successful than I am, so he makes me feel unsuccessful. And he reminds me how unsuccessful I am. And he reminds me how much I hate myself and my life. And isn't it? So we end up hating people because they do something good that we haven't done. But if I think, I'm actually coming out with a book, maybe I should have come out with it 20 years ago, but I'm coming out with a book, and, I've done a few good things, and I'm happy with myself. Then when I see Korma, I'm very happy to see him, and he tells me I've just done this and that, and I'm very happy to hear it because it doesn't intimidate me that there's anything wrong with me. So I've noticed that so many problems like fault-finding, envy, jealousy and all, it often stems from just person not being happy in his own skin, just not being satisfied with who he is. And this is how Krishna made me, so be happy with it. That's my personal experience. Because once you just kind of accept this is how you are and use your gifts in service, why would you be envious of someone else? You're happy. Isn't it? So I think that's really important. And our society has expertly created this mentality. Because we're always being told that you're not good enough. Do you know, ladies and gentlemen, do you know you're not good enough? You could be much better. You could have a bigger house, you could have more money, better car, more successful. Come to my seminar and I'll show you how to do it. And to advertise my seminar, first I have to make you feel really bad with your life, like there's something wrong. Isn't it? And when you feel really bad, I can convince you, okay, I'll make you successful. Ladies and gentlemen, when the iPhone 7 came out, I just want to let you know your life is useless without it. And you should be envious of your friends who have it, and you don't. That's how advertising works, doesn't it? To make you feel bad that you don't have something, or there's something wrong with you. Okay, I'm going to tell you something. It's so funny, you won't even laugh, but it's funny. I was at a fair once, and this person had antique bottles of medicine from 1890 to 1910 or something, Because in those days it was all herbal. Allopathic medicine came later in the 20s or 30s. So there was a bottle of herbs, and guess what the function of this bottle was? To gain weight. Isn't that funny? Because in those days, peasants, farmers were thin, so that was a sign of poverty. And if you had money, you could eat like a pig and get fat like a pig. And so that was a sign of decadence, opulence, and wealth. So in those days, being fat was beautiful. Today, being fat is not beautiful. So we have these social pressures that, make us feel, all of you who think you're fat, you would have been models in 1895. But now in 2017, sorry to tell you, the models I had a friend who's a photographer, models eat tissue paper. Did you know that? So they won't get hungry, and then they won't eat anything, and they can lose weight. It's insane. Yes. He was a photographer, and that's what they would do. For a week before the photo shoot, they had to get to a certain size. If you eat tissue paper, you won't be very hungry. If you don't believe me, you can test it out and see. So, you know, you go to school, and you're someone like me, who when you go in the science class, you stare in outer space, you don't have any interest in what they're saying, and even if you do, you can't figure it out, so you just sit there. And it all goes in your ear. It's just like your brain doesn't have cells for science and engineering and mechanical things. It's just like, boom, right? So now, if my value is based on how well I understand mechanics and engineering and physics and chemistry, I'll become pretty depressed because I'll think I'm like a real loser, right? But there are other classes I did really well in. So what many people do is they have skills and talents, but they focus on what they're not good at, and they become depressed. And I think there's something wrong with me. I think that's a condition of modern society, to make us feel like, you know, if you're not a lawyer, doctor, engineer, software programmer, or MBA, you know, something's wrong with you. Even though you completely hate all of those. Right? According to me, if you're an MBA, doctor, lawyer, engineer, computer software programmer, you hate it, something's wrong with you that you went into a profession that you hated. But the pressure is, if you have that title and you have a big bank account, you're successful. So you do it. Yes? I have a title after my name. Everyone with their business card has titles, right? HSCC. They have titles. I don't even know what they are. I'm not even sure they know what they are. They have all these titles. Here's my calling card, all these titles. My title is UDO. Steve Jobs was a UDO. Bill Gates was a UDO. I'm in good company. Who knows what a UDO is? Anybody have a UDO on their business card? University dropout. You actually think I put that on my business card? No. But I'm thinking about it. Everyone will go, what's that? University dropout, yeah. What's your qualification? When we were hippies in the 60s, the philosophy was the only smart people are the ones who drop out of university. The ones who are still going, they haven't figured it out yet. That was our philosophy. So the UDOs were like the intelligentsia, like, what am I doing in university? This is like stupid. So we had a different philosophy, but nowadays it's, if you don't have big titles and a lot of money, nice car, labels on your clothes, some people don't like you, isn't it? So that's the problem. And naturally we become envious of those who have it, and naturally we think something's wrong with us. Do you know what Martin Luther King said about this? He said something amazing. But before I tell you what he said, I was driving from Vrindavan to Delhi, and as every good Hare Krishna devotee does when they get in the car, they fall asleep. Because Hare Krishna devotees, if they're bona fide, they eat too much and they sleep too little. So when they get in cars, they fall asleep. So I fell asleep. And I woke up, and as soon as I woke up, I said, I have a title for a book. And the title for the book is called Dancing with Your Broom. Everybody's like, Dancing with Your Broom? What's that book about? And I said, that book is about doing your dharma. And if your dharma is to be a street sweeper, then you accept it and you sweep the street dancing. And then I found the quote from Martin Luther King. And he said, if you are called to sweep streets, then sweep streets as Michelangelo painted, as Shakespeare wrote, and you will attract the host of angels, and they will praise you by saying, here lived a great street sweeper. Isn't that wonderful? Yeah. So that's the actual philosophy, if that's what you're called to do. And then right after this happened, I went to Mexico, and all over Mexico there's street sweepers, and Mexicans are happy, and they were dancing with their broom. Like, I have to take a picture of this for the cover of my book. This is so I think if I ever write that book, I think it would be an important contribution to modern society, dancing with your broom. That whatever you do, if that's what you're called to do, then do it and accept it. That's what God wants me to do. It's okay. You can be a happy street sweeper. There's a lot of unhappy CEOs that are making a few million. There's a lot of happy street sweepers in Mexico. Any Mexicans here? There are happy street sweepers in Mexico. I can promise you, yeah. So I think, criticism, blame, envy, jealousy, a lot of it is born out of just this dissatisfaction. So now Korma's here, so because he's so much more successful than I am, I'm going to criticize him so I can feel better. Actually, he's really not that successful. It just appears that way because he's got a lot of promotion. But really, when you actually analyze it, he's not that great. I have to do that. I knew he was going to say that. So I have to do that to make myself feel better, right? So that's, if you're uncomfortable with someone who's better than you, that's a problem. Don't you think? It's a problem. Move the mic so they can see you better. Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the world famous Korma Das, author of many amazing cookbooks, host of the TV show Cooking with Korma, world famous. And here's little old Mahatma, a total loser. No books, no TV shows. I'm so envious of him. I want to wring his neck. I can't stand it. Isn't it like that? Have you ever felt like that? You don't have to say yes because I already know the answer is yes. Because this is how conditioned souls think. And this is what we're dealing with. And in becoming spiritual, when you become spiritually elevated, you're not envious of anyone. Now, I want to tell you something really amazing, which is quite a foreign concept to Westerners. But my spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, said, if you eat meat, you're envious of the animal you're eating. You imagine going to McDonald's and saying, you're eating a cow and you're envious of that cow. What are people going to think? I'm not envious of the cow. I like cows. I'm not envious. So in Sanskrit, the word for envy also has the connotation of violence. So when you commit violence, it's an act of envy. When you take away someone's life, it's an act of envy. So that's an interesting definition, isn't it? That's an expanded definition. Anyway, it's something to think about. If you're not yet vegetarian, according to Indian philosophy, you're envious of the animals you're eating because you didn't allow them to live. Interesting. You might say, I'm not envious. I don't want to be a cow. It's a different kind of different definition of envy. It's not allowing, it's committing violence. That's considered envy. So thank you for that question. That was super fantastic. Yes?
Can I ask a question about Mahatma?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. My daughter might have to answer it, but anyway.
Because it's been like daunting me. The fact that, remember that Drona was killed by his basically disciple, and the fact that Yudhishthira had to lie, Yudhishthira is the ultimate virtuous man.
Yeah,
and,
yes.
Actually, Krishna himself makes him to go through this horrible.
Yeah, right.
So,
What's going on?
I mean, there's thousands ways
Yeah.
of how Krishna could have,
Yeah.
got away with it.
That's an interesting question. Because you know the word dharma. Dharma could be translated as religion or duty. And we have the word morality. So dharma is higher than morality, and sometimes dharma doesn't come out moral because its function is high, its purpose is higher. So on our plane of mundane morality, we might see it as bad. From the dharmic plane, it's good. Krishna had a plan. And to be successful in his plan, it would benefit the world. If he failed in his plan, it would harm the world. So, therefore, to be attached to being truthful in a way which would not produce a higher result, then he determined, better you lie because this way you'll win. You know that story when some criminals were trying to kill someone for no reason, and that person ran into a house, and they said, there's some criminals after me. Can I hide here? And he was a Brahmin, and a Brahmin is truthful. And so the criminals came to the house and said, is anybody hiding in here? And he said, yes, and they went in and killed him. So he should have lied, don't you think? That was a higher dharma. To protect a life is a higher dharma than to be truthful.
I get that. What
Yeah.
I don't get is that there were hundreds of other ways of killing.
Okay.
Killing Drona.
Yeah.
Why choose the one just to humiliate?
Okay,
Yudhishthira?
it teaches all right. As long as you got that first principle, we can go to the next principle. And the next principle is that, well, we'll go back to the first principle. Like you said, he was the incarnation of Dharma. And, but sometimes you can become so dharmic that it's counterproductive. And Krishna wanted to teach that. But he also wanted to teach surrender. That sometimes the teacher may ask you to do something that maybe you don't feel like doing or it doesn't seem right. Because the whole Bhagavad Gita is about Arjuna saying it doesn't seem right to fight, and Krishna saying it is right. And Arjuna is giving all the reasons it's not right. And then the ultimate conclusion was that Arjuna, as a disciple, couldn't resolve his internal conflict unless he followed Krishna's instruction. And he became happy when he fought. He became happy when he did what initially he thought was the worst thing possible, because now he was following Krishna's instructions, which he couldn't understand in the beginning because he was looking at it from a very moral or materialistic perspective. So it teaches that also, that sometimes we're only viewing it from one dimension, and Krishna is viewing it from all dimensions. And sometimes we have to put our ego aside and say, okay, I don't understand, but I know you understand, so I'll do it. Which is not easy. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, let's relate this to Prabhupada. Prabhupada is my spiritual master. His spiritual master told him at the age of 23, you should go to the West to spread this message. Now that doesn't make sense. I think he just had like 2 young children. He's 23, just recently married. So to go to the West didn't make sense. So he had to figure out how to do it, so he waited till the family was raised. And then he was in this situation where everyone was telling him, why are you going to the West? It's not going to work. Everyone. There's not one person that told him it's going to work. Everyone said, it's not going to work. And in fact, previously, it was tried and it didn't work. So not only are we telling you it's not going to work, it was already tried and it didn't work. So Prabhupada was once joking, and they said, why did you go to New York? Why didn't you go to London? And he said, well, some of my godbrothers, godbrother means disciples of the same guru, some of my godbrothers, they went to London and failed. He said, even they tried in Germany and they failed. So I thought, I'll go to New York and fail there. We've already failed in London and Germany, why go back and fail again? So he was joking, but in that joke he's saying, this is impossible. So why did he do it? Because his spiritual master said, do it. He had faith in something that didn't seem possible. So it's similar to that. Like, say that Ashwatthama has been killed. Well, what did he say? Ashwatthama, the elephant, has been killed. Ashwatthama was his son. And Krishna said, if you tell him his son has been killed, he'll stop fighting. And if he stops fighting, we'll win the war. So Yudhishthira was honest. He didn't want to lie. So he said, there was an elephant called Ashwatthama. So he said, Ashwatthama, the elephant, is killed. And of course, the elephant wasn't heard. And so we're attached to that everything should be just the way it should be. And Krishna sometimes, and the spiritual master sometimes shakes us up. Says, no, there's a higher principle. And that's what Prabhupada did. You know what people told Prabhupada? You're going to America to die. And Prabhupada didn't even think he could find any vegetarian food in America. He thought he's going to live on oats or something. People thought that. And so that's another aspect of it. Sometimes you get an instruction, it doesn't make sense, but it's the right instruction. And when you execute it, you find out it's the right instruction. So Arjuna did the right thing. We were talking the other day about an interesting principle. You see, in the beginning, Arjuna was refusing to do what Krishna said. And what he wanted to do was not fight and let the opposing party win, and he would live a very simple life. He thought that was the most virtuous thing. We won't have to kill anybody. I'm not going to fight for land or kingdom. I'll just give it up, and I'll live as a beggar. I'll just live like a sadhu, a saint, as a beggar. So externally, that seems like amazingly benevolent, doesn't it? I'm just going to walk off the battlefield. There'll be no bloodshed. I'm not going to try to claim the land that was stolen from me. I'll just live as a saint and beggar. So externally, that seemed like this is the most dharmic, perfect, humble, compassionate thing you could do.
It doesn't though, because he's a kshatriya, right? He's not supposed to give up his arms. So that's kind of more logical to me. Yeah.
Okay, but apply the same principle to your other question. Yeah. The same logic is there. Okay, that's logical to you because you understand his duty is to fight. But for the average person, it's not logical. It's more logical not to fight. There's 680 million lives could have been saved if Arjuna didn't fight. But if he didn't fight, he'd be disobeying Krishna. And if Yudhisthira didn't say Aswatthama is dead, he'd be disobeying Krishna. And Krishna had a purpose for that. And his purpose, in other words, you're analyzing. Lying is wrong. The scripture says the earth cannot tolerate liars. It's like and the scripture says lying is one of the most sinful activities. Did you know? And Krishna is telling Yudhisthira, lie. And Yudhisthira is the personification of truthfulness. So it's like, there's lessons in there. That this is a higher principle now. And you're going to have to detach yourself from your attachment to morality or whatever dharma you're attached to, because this is much higher. So dharma is higher than morality, and surrender is higher than dharma. That's why Krishna said, what did he say at the end of the Gita? Give up dharma. So don't be attached. So that's the lesson for the disciple. And Arjuna did it, and he's glorified for doing it. And happy also. Think about it. Sometimes, in the early days of our movement, there was a lot of propaganda about we're brainwashed. So you'd be out somewhere and a reporter would come up to you with a microphone. If your guru asked you to take poison, would you take it? If your guru asked you to jump off the Empire State Building, would you do it? What do you say? Of course, the answer is he wouldn't ask. But these are the dilemmas of surrender. Okay, my life. You want to hear about my life? My life is very interesting. When I was at the ripe age of 19, having been a member of this movement for a full 8 months, fully experienced in the world, ready to tackle anything, I was asked to take over a temple, having zero experience with anything other than sex, drugs, and rock and roll. I could do that, but as far as managing an organization, I had no experience. And you might think that was not a judicious move for Prabhupada to ask me, so young, so inexperienced, to manage a temple. That means I'm managing people's lives. It was one of the major cities in Canada. I'm in charge. Doesn't make sense, does it? And I left there 2 years later, and there were 2 temples and like 25 devotees. How did that happen? I don't know how it happened, but it happened. I fumbled through it and it happened. So some things don't always make sense. I don't know if I could go back there now and do it, but somehow I fumbled through it, and so sometimes things are like that. There's power in following the order of a spiritual master. You want to know what happened when we went up there? Another interesting story. They said, here's the temple, here's the devotees, here's the program, here's the bank balance. You have $500 in the bank, which was not a lot of money, but in those days it was sufficient. Your rent is due, $250 rent, you have $500 in the bank, okay, we're good. I went to the bank to take out money to pay the rent. He made a slight mistake. He added 1 zero too much. There was only $50 in the bank. Now what do you do? Right. So, do you go at the age of 19 to a new country, new city, with no experience, and with a superior who is so spaced out, he leaves you with not enough money to pay the rent that was due next week? And with faith, you go forward, and somehow or other, someone knocks on the door the day the rent is due. He says, I want to join your temple. I've brought all my savings. The rent is $250. How much do you think his savings is? Take a wild guess. It starts with a 2 and ends with a 0. $250. Okay. So it works that way. If you have faith, it works that way. So, as we know, Prabhupada was very successful. And Prabhupada said, it is not my qualification. I follow my guru. That's why I'm successful. Otherwise, Prabhupada said, one poor Indian man in your country was a possibility he would be successful. There isn't any. He said, but I had faith in the order of my guru. And because of that faith, I got the power. So Yudhisthira had faith in Krishna. Now, what if Yudhisthira said, Krishna? No, I'm not going to say that. What do you think? Would that be good? It would be good for the moralist, but for the spiritualist, no. Spiritualists would condemn him, don't you think? For not obeying Krishna? Or you want to think, yeah. Yes. Sometimes spiritual life is challenging because it challenges maybe accepted morals, thoughts, patterns. And I'm not saying we should be immoral and we shouldn't use our common sense and so forth. But sometimes you'll get an instruction like that, and you'll try to analyze it materially, and the spiritual master will say, "No, you don't understand." Not that you shouldn't try to understand it, but sometimes we don't, and we have to accept that it's a little bit above intelligence. It's transcendental. You could call it blind faith. We shouldn't have blind faith. We should be reasonable and logical. But sometimes it's not entirely reasonable, always. I always have this vision when I have some doubt. Krishna, why did you do this? Or why did you ask this? Then, after I die, I can ask him. I'll go back, why this? And he'll explain it perfectly. So you didn't understand. It was this, that, and the next thing. And he understands everything. I understand a little bit of the picture. He has the whole picture. Right? So we have to, have to always remember, he's got the whole picture. I have a little part of it. Is that okay? Okay. You're welcome. So, what else do we want to talk about? Oh. The red carpet treatment. I was reading Vishaka's book, and there's one chapter, or one she said, midlife crisis at age of 20, something like that. And I thought, I could write a book called Midlife Crisis at the Age of 17. It was, most people or many people hit a point in their life when they realized that everything they're doing was kind of useless, waste of time, and they need to find meaning and purpose. So that happened to me about the age of 17, which is kind of young, midlife crisis at age 17. And people used to ask me, how'd you become a devotee and why? And recently I was pondering the question, why? And I came to the conclusion that if someone at such an early age is ready to give up material life, that must be a carryover from the last life, because that's too young. And you just you haven't done enough things by the age of 17 to say, okay, that's enough, I've had it. So, you might say, oh, Mahatma, he's so puffed up. Now he's telling us he was a great devotee in his last life, and that's why he's become a devotee. And I don't say I was a great devotee, but it's more of a philosophical analysis. Why would a 17-year-old be looking for spiritual life and saying, okay, I'm finished with material life. You want to go to college? No. You want to do this? No. You want to do that? Why? Because I want to find out what life's about. Why do all these other things? So that's now something very interesting happened in about 1968. The Hare Krishna devotees opened a temple in the city of Los Angeles. And in 1968, there were probably maybe 12 temples at the most, I think, in ISKCON. Maybe less. And maybe like 200 devotees in the whole world. It's interesting, isn't it? Like now you have a festival and there's 3,000 devotees. And I'd say, when I joined, there were only 300 in the whole movement. Now there's 3,000 in this room. And they all think that's really strange. They can't imagine that the whole movement. So here I am, living in Los Angeles. The devotees come to Los Angeles. One of maybe 7 temples. And that temple happens to be 6 blocks from where I grew up. It's like, that's interesting, don't you think? So I'm a high school student, and I see these people walking around my neighborhood, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna. Then I go up, you've all heard of Sunset Boulevard? Sunset, Hollywood, So when we're young, as all young people, on Friday, Saturday night who have nothing to do, they go to Hollywood and walk around and come home depressed. Spend their money and come home depressed. So then there'd be the devotees there. I'd see the devotees. So then I went to college, university. And then who do you think I saw at the university? These bald-headed guys in bed sheets. You know those guys? You've seen them before? Playing tambourines on the street, yeah. So there they are again, How many universities are there in America? A lot, thousands. How many universities have temples next to them? Maybe 2. And I'm going to one of them? Coincidence? I don't know. Gets better. So then, I'm registering for a class. I think did I tell this story the other day? I was in a bookstore. Didn't I tell you this story? The week before we register for class, in those days there was no online registration, so you have to actually walk to different classes and sign up for them. So the week before, I'm in a bookstore. I told the story? No. The story is amazing because when I was young, I never read books. 0 books. You say, how many books have you read by the time you entered college? I said, if it wasn't required for class, 0. Why? Because I was out surfing, skateboarding, playing guitar, or anything you put in my hand, any ball you put in my hand, I'll play that sport. I just loved to be active. And I did read, but I read surfing magazines. That was it. No, I did read Siddhartha. It was the only book I ever read. I wasn't reading. So here I am, I'm sitting in a bookstore. Doesn't make sense. Why would you be in a bookstore if you don't read books? Can anybody tell me why I would be in a bookstore if I never read any books outside of required text for class? Doesn't make sense, does it? And so, if you sit there when the door opens, they might, yeah. Why don't you move up here so you don't, why doesn't everybody move up? So no one has to sit in the doorway. So wasn't that amazing? Then, somehow or other, this bookstore had a book that caught my eye. Of all the books in the bookstore, one book caught my eye. Starts with a B. Can anyone guess what that book is? Take a wild guess. Starts with a B. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Beyond Birth and Death hadn't come out yet. Bhagavad Gita. All the books in the... So I'm at a bookstore, I don't read, doesn't make sense. And of all the books, Bhagavad Gita. Take me, take me. Now, special blessing. It wasn't Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, it was some Bhagavad Gita that if I read, I wouldn't have been able to understand. And the blessing was, I had no money in my pocket, so I couldn't buy it. So I made a note, I should read this book. Why I made that note, I don't know. And you'll ask, did you know what Bhagavad Gita is? I didn't know what it was. I had no idea. But I knew it was Indian, and I thought, it must be cool, because it's from India. And I had no idea other than that, never read any Indian literature. And this little voice says, you must read this book. And the little voice had arranged no money in my pockets, so I couldn't buy that edition. So I go to register for class a few days later with this memory that I'm supposed to read this book, and there is one of those bald-headed guys in bed sheets sitting behind a table with a sign that says Bhagavad Gita, 4 units. You use units in this country? Like, yeah, classes are given units, and you have to take 16 units per semester. And 4 units is the most units a class will be. Now I'm looking at this, and it's Bhagavad Gita, 4 units. It means I could take Bhagavad Gita and get as an accredited class. Is that amazing? So I run up to the table. How many of you were here last week? Sunday feast? Raise your hand. Hridayana Maharaj was, well, he was the one sitting behind the table. Signed up. Now, gets better. I'm just trying to tell the story so you realize I didn't actually do anything to become a devotee. It was just lined up one by one by one. So, Hridayana Maharaj, then his name was Howard. And he was a student at the university that I was going to. And he had a relationship with a professor, and he convinced the professor, please let me teach Bhagavad Gita and allow the students to take it to get credit as an outside study. And so, with that arrangement, I could learn Bhagavad Gita from the devotees and get credit as a philosophy class, 4 units. Which was the only class I ever got an A in the university. I passed with flying colors. So, now, gets better. Should we make a movie? We'll call it the red carpet treatment. Yeah. So, I'm living, Howard, we'll call him Howard now. Howard is from the same neighborhood I am. Went to the same high school. I think he lived like 6 blocks from me, something like that, or 5 blocks. So I'm now living in a house, 5-bedroom house at this university in California called Berkeley. And in the house, everyone living in the house is friends of Howard. They're all from Los Angeles. They're all his friends. And one of the friends in the house is very interested in Krishna consciousness. So every week he comes back to the house and says, I met Howard today. This is what we talked about. And he preached to everyone in the house about the conversations he had. So now I'm living in a house where there's a person preaching Krishna consciousness to everyone in the house. Doesn't get much easier than that, does it? So then when the semester's over, I go back to Los Angeles, because that's where I'm from. I take the 5-minute drive to the temple Did I tell you the story? I invite my friend, bring 2 friends. They come to the temple. Amazing experience. Call them up the next morning, say, do you want to come? And they say, no way, I'm not coming. I said, why? I said, because if I come back, I'll never leave. I'm never going back there. They were so impressed. And so I go back there the next morning, and unfortunately, they should have gone back, because when I get back there, they said, Prabhupada is coming. So I got to go to the airport and meet Prabhupada. So from the bookstore in Berkeley to the class to 10 weeks later meeting Prabhupada, my material life was basically finished. And right before that experience, I think I told you, I had an experience with a psychedelic drug. And on this drug, I had a meditation. And the meditation was, I could get this high without drugs, but I have to find out how. And just shortly after that is when I got Bhagavad Gita. So I was like looking for it. So in retrospect, my realization is that I must have been evolving that way and just kind of finishing, because I didn't have to do anything to become a devotee. It was done for me. You have the same experience? It was done for you? Yeah. So I think when when you're meant to become a devotee and you've done it, it's just like it's supposed to happen. So, and all your experiences leading up to that prepare you so that when it's time to do it, you can actually do it. You want to hear something funny? In my generation, everyone who joined the Hare Krishna movement was a hippie. And one non-hippie slipped in somehow or other. It was like no non-hippies ever became devotees. One non-hippie became a devotee, and he had such a hard time, and he left. And when he was leaving, he said, you all had unlimited sex and unlimited drugs, and I never did, and that's why you can do this, and I can't, and I have to go out and do it, because I'm not burned out and frustrated like you all. So he left. And so for us, it's like, what led us to become Krishna conscious was we had done so many things. It was like, how do I want to say it? It's like everything happened very fast in our generation, Instead of being married, for 30 years, you have like, in 1 year you have like 10 girlfriends, and you have, as much sex as you'd have in your whole married life. So everything was condensed. It was like a time warp. And you take enough drugs to last you for 3 lifetimes, and, you have so many experiences that you have a whole lifetime of experience by the time you're 18, so you're ready to be a devotee. You agree? Something like that? Yeah. But, we were pretty wild, so we did a lot of wild things. And so we clicked in a lot of time, a lot of experiences. So that way Krishna gets us ready. So that's my story. And then I sold everything I had. Whatever I couldn't sell, I brought to the temple. And a few months later, I left to help some devotees open another temple. And then a few months later, I went to another temple. And a few months later, I went to another temple. And that's when I became the president. And what I noticed that each time I was going from one temple to another, I wasn't bringing anything that I brought. Like our possessions were communal. So when I finally went to Vancouver, I didn't have one thing that 9 months ago I brought to the movement. So that's how we lived. My nice sweater, my nice this. Someone else had it. So we lived dependent on Krishna. Is that okay? Whether it's okay or not, that's what it was. Anyway, maybe that should be if I write my book, maybe I should call it the red carpet treatment. Because that's how I feel. It's just like, here's the carpet, just walk on it, everything will happen. Then, as I told the devotees the other day, then I became a devotee and ended up in jail 5 times. And I'd never been in jail before. Become a Hare Krishna. It's quite exciting. No, we were distributing books, and sometimes the stores in front of where we're distributing weren't too happy, so they'd arrest us. Or we were chanting on the street, and they didn't like it, and they'd arrest us. You've been arrested before? Yeah. How many times?
3.
Oh. See, I got something up on Korma now. 5-3. Well, you know, he could catch up if he wants. Las Vegas, we were thrown in jail. The whole Sankirtan. 5 men, 5 women. Tijuana, Mexico, thrown in jail. Yeah, quite exciting life. Now all these people are thinking, I'm never going to come back to the Hare Krishna temple. Our lives were quite exciting. We were a revolutionary movement. We were spreading something very new, and we were taking a lot of chances, putting ourselves on the line because we believed it. And we were willing to go to jail if we had to. We didn't stay that long, but it's kind of fun. Did you have fun in jail? Tijuana jail was not fun. Las Vegas was more fun. All right, what else? Anything? You want me to talk about anything else? You have?
Just, 48 years later.
Yeah, I'm still here, still alive.
Yeah, but people are still taking the Krishna consciousness, but probably in different ways.
Yes.
And I know that you have a kind of an organization you're developing as well to help people, to take to that in different walks of life.
Yes.
Different ways. So you could explain a little bit about that.
Well, I don't know about Australia, but in America, in the late 60s, if you were convinced of something, you would give your life to it, because otherwise you would consider yourself a hypocrite. So like, you could walk in, if this was let's say 69, you'd walk in the temple. If I could sit down and convince you that this was true, you wouldn't leave. You'd go, okay, it's true, I accept it. And you'd say, okay, that's it, I'm staying here. That was the mood. Was that like that in Australia? Yeah, pretty much. In other words, you would feel a hypocrite if you accepted it to be true and you didn't live it. You would, if you believed it, you'd give your life to it. And people weren't so career-oriented. They were more why-driven. What's the purpose? What's the reason? Why am I living? I need to find that out before I commit to anything. So they would come and find purpose in spiritual life, and they'd say, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And they didn't think, what about my career? What about my future? It wasn't the way people thought then. So all you had to do was convince somebody philosophically and logically that the Bhagavad Gita is true, and that's it. They would give their life. Isn't that interesting? Things are different now. People who accept Bhagavad Gita want to see how they can adapt that to their lifestyle, to what they're doing. Whereas those days it was like that we would stop doing and just give everything. So a lot of what I've been doing in the last 5 or 10 years is focusing on helping people apply the teachings of Bhagavad Gita to what they're doing in their lives. At work, how do you think, how do you deal with people? At home, in relationships, in groups, and help people think more practically in seeing Bhagavad Gita as a practice. The teachings are something you can practice all day, every day, not just Sunday at the temple. So then I develop workshops and courses around those concepts. And I think it's very important. It's not all or nothing. And we were talking about this a few days ago in one of the courses, that a lot of us, when we practice spiritual life, if we do some aspect of it well, we think we're covered for the whole day, which is a misunderstanding. Like we chant, we get up and we chant. So some people think, well, if you get up and you chant, then whatever you do the rest of the day is good, even if it's not good. So I'm trying to help people integrate throughout the day and not think, just if you get up early, chant, say a few prayers, then you can do anything you want all day and call it spiritual, because it's not true. I went to the Hare Krishna temple on Sunday, I'm good for the week, can do any damn thing I want. No, it doesn't work that way. Karma is always a reaction for everything you do and think. There'll always be a reaction. So integration, I think that's the idea. Integration, 24. Living as a spiritual practice. So that's what we're trying to do. And helping people solve their problems using spiritual solutions. Is that okay? Or are you thinking of something else? That was good. Yes.
I was reading one of your papers there, I can't remember the name of it, but it started off something about how to make an Egypt for yourself in front of your spiritual master.
Say that again. How to?
Well, that's the Irish way of saying it. How do you make an Egypt of yourself in front of your spiritual master? Something like this on Landfax. But there was a line in it that stuck with me, and it was, I may have read it wrong, but it's the way I read it, it said that Prabhupada once mentioned something that maybe one day one of his disciples would be good enough to get him,
Good enough to get
him back to.
Oh yeah.
Am I taking it?
No, he said that, yeah.
Could you
What does that mean?
Could you explain what he meant, if you know what he meant by that, or what it means? What you meant by quoting it?
She read an article that I wrote, and he said, Prabhupada said, I hope one of my disciples will become a pure devotee and take me back to Godhead. Would you like to answer that question? When you become Krishna conscious, you become extremely humble, and you actually see your disciples better than yourself. And so Prabhupada, in the ecstasy of his humility, I'll tell you a story. This is an amazing story. I don't know if everyone will understand it. It's pretty esoteric, but we'll shoot it out for you, and then we'll try to explain it. When this movement started, our spiritual master, Srila Prabhupada, he asked us to open 108 temples. So there was kind of an intense fervor to open these 108 before he died. So we were just like opening them as many as we could. Whenever there was a possibility to open, we would open. And he said, in one lecture, he said, please open 108 temples before I die. Then I will feel that I've satisfied my spiritual master, and then I can die peacefully and go to hell. That's what he said. Doesn't make sense, right? Well, it's going to make less sense when I continue talking. And then his disciples said, Prabhupada, if you are going to go, he said, no, you won't go to hell, you'll go to Krishna. He said, no, I'm very fallen, I will go to hell. And then the disciples said, Prabhupada, if you go to hell, we want to go with you. He said, no, you're going back to Krishna. So how do we understand that? That we understand on a very elevated stage of Krishna consciousness, these intense feelings of humility manifest in the heart, where you actually see your disciples as better than you, and you see that your disciples are going to Krishna and you're not. Can we understand that? Probably not. Can we talk about it? Yeah, we can talk about it. Can we try to understand it? Yeah. At least we understand that extreme level of humility develops on very high stages. So Prabhupada in that humility was thinking, well, maybe if one of my disciples becomes pure, he can take me back to Godhead. And it wasn't, like sometimes we may say that just because we say things like that because it sounds good. He wasn't saying it to sound good. He actually was feeling that. So when you achieve love of God, you exhibit extreme levels of humility. And in those extreme levels of humility, you see everybody better than yourself. And it's said when you hit that level of humility, you won't teach anybody anything, because you'll feel that everybody is already better than you and there's nobody to teach. That's pretty inconceivable for us, right? I mean, could you imagine after today, you walk out on the street and everyone you see, you think, you're better than me? That's inconceivable. You might realize a few people are better, but everybody? No. That's a manifestation of intense humility. And it's a kind of ecstasy. And it's nothing we can relate to exactly, but it happens on that high level. You know the story. Krishna asked Yudhisthira, find somebody lower than you, and he couldn't find anybody. He looked all day, came back, I said, I don't find anybody lower. He asked Duryodhana, find someone higher. He looked all day and said, I can't find anybody higher. So they personified materialistic mentality and transcendental spiritual mentality. Or did I get it backwards? Yudhisthira, find somebody better. Yudhisthira, no, find somebody, what? Did I say it right? Yeah, okay. Dronacharya, I can't find anybody better than me. I'm the best. Yudhisthira, I can't find anybody lower than me. Is that amazing? If I asked you, go out, find somebody lower than you, and you came back and said, nah, nobody, we'd think you're weird, wouldn't we? Or say, no, you. But this is how an elevated soul, yeah, he actually feels that way. Is that okay? Yeah.
Just like as follow on, there was from a lecture from Prabhu, there was a part of it where the devotees were asking him. I can't phrase it exactly what it was, but it was something to do with the spiritual master not going back to Godhead
Oh, yeah.
until the devotees go back. And
Yeah.
he said something, but then I was listening or reading somewhere else, and not that it was contradictory, but someone was asking a similar thing, and they said, so will we see you when we go back to Krishna? And he said something like, yes, I'll be there. I don't, again.
That's the concept is that when you accept a spiritual master and the spiritual master accepts you, he's accepting to take you back to Godhead. So sometimes Prabhupada said he'll come back to get you. But we understand, like if that's true, then we have to find Prabhupada now, because he's got disciples that have deviated, and he should be like, how old? How long has it been? 37, 38. So where's the 38-year-old saint? But we understand that those coming in disciplic succession representing Prabhupada, that's also him saving, right? Like if I were devoting my last life, I had a different spiritual master, and who Prabhupada in this life is representing. So it's one in that sense. So he's coming that way. And what was the second half of the statement? That Prabhupada will be there. Yeah. That connection is eternal. Sometimes when Prabhupada was asked about situations in the spiritual world, he would joke and say, he wouldn't answer. He'd say, well, when you go there, you'll find out. So some things are not logical within these dimensions. But in the spiritual world, you have your guru, and you'll be guided within your group by your gurus. And we'll all live happily ever after. You want to go? Yeah, let's go. I have some good news for everyone. There is a spiritual world and you can go there. And one of the best things about it is you don't have to work. That alone convinces me I want to go. You don't have to work. Is that good or good? Yeah, so that alone. You may not be that spiritual, but just know, if you go back to the spiritual world where God lives, you don't have to work. And the weather is good. Every day. And I think anyone who lives in Ireland is extremely fortunate, because you have such a strong impetus to want to go to the spiritual world. Because things are just not that great here. I went to South Africa in 1981, and the white people in South Africa were living a life, amazing life. It was one of the wealthiest countries in the world. And none of the white people were that interested in spiritual life because their life was so great. Everything was so fantastic. They didn't really feel they needed God. It was just like they all had a few servants. Business was great. Johannesburg looked like Beverly Hills. Just amazing. Now it's not like that. And so many of the white people are becoming devotees. So we sometimes need a little cloudy, cold weather to help us become more spiritual. You agree? So this weather is good for spiritual life. Don't go to South Africa. Yes?
Can you describe your strongest, best spiritual experience, transcendental experience?
Oh. With Prabhupada or so far? Oh. There are many. I would say some of the deepest are chanting either alone or in kirtan together. And there's, of course, being with Prabhupada. And I lived in Vrindavan for a while, for a few years. That was amazing. But I don't know if I can describe them. I can, tell you where they happened or, around what happened, but the experience.
So how does that feel?
It doesn't feel like anything that you could ever experience. Maybe the best way to say is that it's a glimpse of love without any lust in it. Because if you can get love with no lust, that's the highest you can go. And love in this world it becomes frustrating when lust is mixed within it, because we want the pure love. It's a glimpse of love, that's what I would say. Being in Vrindavan, the feeling is a glimpse of what real love is. There's a story about the love between Krishna and his mother. And the way this love was described was that Krishna loved his mother so much, and she loved him so much, that if you took all the love in this world and you multiplied it 1,000,000 times, it wouldn't equal a fraction of the love they were experiencing. And that's not love of this world. It's so when you experience happiness in spiritual life, you're getting a glimpse of real love. When we met Prabhupada, we got a glimpse of real love, both in him and how he affected us in serving him. It's like Korma and myself, we did so much service out of love for Prabhupada, but that love was just Prabhupada's mercy on us. And so that gave us an amazing taste, experience of just wanting to give everything. And
Managed to open 108 temples.
yeah, we did.
You did?
Yeah. Exactly. I think it was exactly 108, wasn't it, when Prabhupada left? It was exactly 108. Well, there were more, because if you add the farms and the schools and restaurants, then there's more. But yeah, we did it. Yeah, that was our life, to satisfy him. That gave us so much pleasure. If you can get a little taste of love, you can't compare that experience with anything in this world. And when we're trying to get that love, through material relationships, we get frustrated because the person can't give it to us. We have to. It has to come from us, and it has to be free of personal motivation. And so many relationships are personally motivated, so we get so frustrated because we don't find it. It evades us. It's like cotton candy love. It looks like it's something, you eat it and there's nothing. So that's what you get in spiritual life. If you get just a drop, a little taste of real love, there's no experience that compares with that. Nothing you could get. And we wouldn't trade it in for anything. You know, like we gave up our youth, we helped spread this movement, and people say, do you ever regret doing that? You know, you could have gone back to school and been successful. And we say we would have never traded those years in for anything else. It was too special. Because we got a taste of love. And if you get that, nothing compares. And how do we describe it? It's hard to describe. Can you describe it? Yeah. You just have to experience it. And yeah. And the paradox is we have to surrender to experience it, and everybody's afraid to surrender and give up their independence. So it's a paradox. Because what we have to do to get the love is the thing we're afraid to do, because we're afraid we won't get the love if we give up independence. But love, the very definition of love is you give yourself to another person. So when you give yourself to Guru and Krishna, you taste love. But in the name of protecting ourselves, we don't want to surrender. So we get caught in a big paradox. You know, like we had Prabhupada's association. He was completely surrendered to Krishna. And we'd see him, and we'd never met anybody that blissful, that enlightened, that with that energy. And so we're looking at this person and we're thinking, if I could be a little bit like that, my life would be perfect. And how did he get that way? His whole life was an example of surrender. So for us, it was that example of surrender was in front of us, and it was so clear that's how you get the bliss. So we just did it. I want it, so I'm going to do it. And we weren't afraid. Actually, we were afraid not to surrender because we saw what Prabhupada was doing. Does that make sense? Yeah. So we should probably have kirtan, right? Yes, or it's too late? A little bit? Okay, thank you for listening. And Hare Krishna. So we're going to do a little kirtan. Oh yeah, so everyone stand up and we'll have Arti ceremony. I'll stand up. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Sorry. Sure. Doesn't want to stop. Hare Krishna. Wow. Maybe it's frozen. I guess you're gonna watch Arti because it doesn't want to stop. I can't stop it. Okay. Okay. What do you want me to chant? Okay.
Play accordion? I'll play accordion as long as you like. But you play accordion?
I've never played it. I probably could try, but you play it?
I can play it.
Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti